Well, welcome back. School is back in our fourth and final video of the Fleet Series School. I want to go over the map and features on the map so that you understand kind of the situation and things that you can understand from looking at the map. Um, This will probably be like my last one for this, but obviously, any questions that you send to me to help explain things, if I see there's enough of a need, I will post a video with that and add it to this school playlist. But let's get into it, shall we? Um, all right, so per the rules, there are different terrain types. If we move around, we'll see that essentially there's several different C hex areas. As you can tell, the map is divided into hexes. Let's talk about just the division of the map. So on each of the Fleet Series games, the way they run things are by separating the sea and the play area into zones. Okay, these zones. Um, are useful. Well, they're useful in several things. One, weather is determined by zone, as well as on the strategic setting, or say it's a strategic air. The number of zones that you can do missions in is driven by these zones, right? So when you launch aircraft in strategic air phase, they don't necessarily check number of hexes to where they're going. It does it abstractly by checking the zones. Okay, so if I think of anything else that's separated by zones, I'll let you know. Um, but pretty much mostly by the strategic air phase. And again, as I've said in many other videos, the game doesn't really utilize the strategic air that much. So zones are less important, but they're helpful to for orders and just understanding context of the map. All right, so the different types of hexes there are. Obviously, you have land hexes, okay, and pretty much uh, this is here for cosmetics, just so you absolutely know where land is. But really, other than the fact that ships can't go on full land hexes, there's not a whole lot done on the land side, okay, from the base game. Um, for my game, however, I do split the land up into logistical areas, okay? So notice you have a France North and a France South. Why did I split up in two? Just because I think from a gaming perspective, if you were to utilize the full land war component of this game, um, which it works, but it's a completely different way of playing the game than using the way the normal Fleet Series goes. So I don't advertise it too much, but these logistical areas are both used to tell you who is in control of that logistical area, as well as it's useful to um, uh, choose that logistical area so that you can actually do things like align the country. Okay, so for let's use this as an example, right? You have for Sweden, we have two zones here: Sweden South and Sweden North. If I were to choose either one of these things and say align to country, it would align the whole country, which means it would align both zones or both I don't know what you want to call it, but both logistical areas. Okay. Now, when we use the full land combat component, which you can designate in the setup phase by either picking garrison combat or full land combat, I pretty much bring up all my the AI plays by the garrison combat rules. I definitely recommend people using the garrison combat rules, and I'll explain the difference between those two. So the real only difference between the two is that by garrison combat, you you win or lose bases by actually landing troops at those bases. Okay, and the strength of the forces there is tracked per that particular base. Okay, um, let's use this as an example. Turku. Turku has a garrison of 10, which is essentially like one load of from an amphibious assault, right? Ship. So, so by landing troops at using the garrison combat by landing troops at Turku and by amassing an amount of forces there, you then have the choice of determining from you as the scenario designer, as the player, whether or not that quantifies um, as a taking over of that base, right? So the game will allow you to drop troops at specific bases. It'll track it per base, and bases can be conquered. But the player is in charge of when the base gets conquered. There is no logic that says things like when the enemy forces get to a certain point, then the base changes hands. So that's garrison combat. It's a little more manual, but it's a little easier to understand. The land combat feature is done not per base, but per um, a zone in total. Okay, so um, let's see. I think only zones that are. Let's see here. Oh, that's right. I'm not. The reason why it's not showing any information is because I'm not selecting this. But if I select here full land combat, okay, game will allow players to invade territories at the strategic level, and bases will perform combat automatically each turn. Complexity high. Again, I don't recommend until you've played this game, and I'm not sure there's anybody yet who's played this game enough that I would tell them to use the land full land combat function. I'm probably the only person that probably could do it just because I understand how it goes. But essentially, now, notice now that when I have it on the full land combat, when I look at strategic areas, I see that it has troop strength and supplies, and um, you can actually increase strength or increase supplies, and even increase in the scenario designer. You can increase the rate at which strength increases. Like imagine like if you had like recruitment or whatever, and the way that supplies go up. Okay, and the neat stuff is every single base in the game is attached to some logistical area. So I think for this logistical area, I believe these three bases are probably, I think there's maybe four. But the point is that you don't need to worry about it because you're not tracking troops per base. Okay, you're tracking them from in the whole. So when you invade places, if I invade any one of these bases, the forces get added to this against this particular logistical zone. And then there's actually a phase that I think every day, it will automatically do battle between there and give you a report of what is attacking what and what are the losses. And when the base actually gets down to zero, then the enemy takes over and it conquers it, and then all the bases that have to do with that zone get conquered. Okay. So it's a pretty neat functionality. There's a phase that allows you to specify that the way you do things is you select a logistical zone, and then you can't do it here because this isn't set up, but essentially there's a phase that says that from the US North or USSR North TVD, I can attack certain areas. I can attack here or I can attack there. I can transfer forces or transfer supplies between um, friendly areas or between areas where I have troops. So it's a bit, it's a much more complicated and automated thing, but uh, but I think it's like to me, it's like very advanced. So if you want to learn more about this full land thing, just let me know. I could probably do a demo of how it works, but for right now, I definitely recommend most people, until people are getting used to the game, to utilize Garrison Combat. And again, Garrison Combat says game will allow player to move supplies and troops between friendly bases via loading and unloading only. Allows tracking of troop levels for VP purposes. Bases can be conquered manually by player. Complexity low. There you go. All right, so that's land. That's pretty much it. I think that's everything you need to know about land. All right, so let's talk about sea. Standard C hexes, everything can go in standard C hexes. Air can go anywhere. There's no restrictions for air, and generally every hex is 1 point for air. Okay. Now um, air also has things like connectivity between. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. So Loring Air Force Base is here. Now Loring Air Force Base is an off-map airbase. So the Fleet Series has a concept of an off-map airbase. Essentially, what that means is, as you see, this little indicator that shows Loring Air Force Base, 13 hexes. That means that aircraft that are based at Loring Air Force Base can take part in missions that are connected in the sea area by which it's connected to. Okay, so if an aircraft has a range of 50, that means 26 points of it are going to be used from getting here to this hex and getting back. So, but the rest of it, 24 points, you can use to move around and do things. Okay, so and those aren't turns, right? So it's not 13 turns; it's 13 hexes worth of movement during the action phase. Okay. Now for ships, ships can so pretty much as long as it's good weather, every hex is going to cost a point for movement of any ship. Okay, and you know how many hexes a ship can move by looking at the movement factor on the marker, which is 3, say here for the tunny. Um, let's see now if there's a squall. So there's two different types of weather patterns that can happen in the game. It happens randomly every AM. Clear, squall, or storm. Squall will turn pretty much will double. I believe it doubles or adds two. Um, no, it adds an additional point to every move that you make. Okay, which means it turns now to 2 points moving. If it's a storm, it becomes up to 4. Okay, so that's how weather has to do it. Uh, weather also has um, weather also has an effect of battling. Um, the ability of you to detect things is affected by the weather. Normally, any surface ship. Let's use this surface ship as an example. This group has a um, two ranges of two different zones of detection. There's an immediate zone, which is the 6 hexes around it, and then there's a secondary zone of I think it's 12 hexes around that. Okay. Now, in a squall, you can only sight out to the hex just that's around the ship. For storm, you can't sight anything. Nothing can be detected. Thus means nothing can be attacked in a storm zone. So a lot of rules that are in the code behind shows that if there is a storm in an area, you pretty much can't do any air missions there. You can't attack anything there. You can't sight anything in there, and your movement is slowed. Okay, so let's talk about other types of hexes. All right, so these lighter colored ones, and it's not the same on every map, right? If we go between, let's look at the Caribbean, for instance. The Caribbean uses a similar thing. I tried to make the colors at least the same. There's certain other things that are different between it, but so you got your normal hex squares, okay? That's regular C. You have shallow, which is here, okay? Um, let's see. There's a couple of restrictions for shallow. I think certain submarines are easier to detect in shallow. And everything I'm talking about from the rules perspective, there is a PDF that comes along with every game. And if you join my Discord server, you will have access to a PDF version of the Third Fleet rules where you can then research all of these. Um, these effects, but I'm just trying to give you some general um, description of that. So you have regular sea, you have shallow, you have restricted. Now, restricted is in addition to being it's essentially it's a shallow, but it's also restricted as well. What does restricted do? So restricted prevents like subs from moving at full speed during restricted. I think it also prevents ships that are moving at high speed. It costs them an extra point to enter uh, these restricted areas. Um, let's see, when there's some impacts on modifiers when it comes to SSM combat, so surface-to-surface missiles that attack somebody in a restricted area. I believe it's actually beneficial for the defender. Okay, um, in some ways. I'm trying to remember the exact rules. If I look at the rules, which what I can do in a little bit. We can tell the difference in there. But essentially, restricted hexes are a little more restricted than shallow and and regular sea hexes. Notice this little divider here. On a couple of the maps, there's a little bit of a divider here, and this is called blocked head side. So all that basically means is that only air can actually move through there. I don't know why that is. It probably has to do with how in reality on the Earth that you can't really go from this piece of sea to this part of sea because of either there's like an island blocking this way or something. You notice in the Caribbean there's quite a number of them. Okay. This is basically the chain of islands that the Florida Keys, and that's basically blocked. So any ship coming is not going to just be able to sail right through there. It's going to have to go around Key West. You'll notice another hex type in here is the shoals. Shoals is shown differently on every map, but essentially, just understand it's not. It's basically the worst case scenario. The restrictions of the shoals is that shoals can only be traveled in by corvettes or patrol craft. Okay, and that looks different on every map. So this is the way shoals look on the Caribbean map because I basically just grabbed these maps from other sources and strung them together. So I did not take the time to make them all, at least on the shoal piece, to make them all the same. Okay. So I'll show you on the second fleet, shoals look like, notice, so this is the way shoals look on the North Atlantic, and this is the way restricted looks. It's pretty much the same, right? I mean, you can understand, right? If it's got the stripes going along, then that means it's restricted. This means it's shallow, and that means it's shoals. There's not a whole lot of shoals hexes in that map. As you go down into the Mediterranean, we start seeing that similar format that was in the Caribbean. Okay, so notice here. Here's a couple of shoals. Here's um, here's shallow. A lot of restricted in the Aegean. Okay. Um, let's see. The game keeps track of all this, and the game takes this stuff into account. And usually, if there's a combat result or a combat impact of the terrain, then you will see it on the battle report. It kind of lines out all of the modifiers that happen, so you'll be able to tell what effect that stuff is having on the battle and on the roles that the computer is taking. All right, is one last. Let's see. So, well, there's a couple more actually. These purple, these purple hexes, these purple hexes are considered fjord hexes. Okay, so fjords are very restrictive as well, even more restrictive than restricted. And if a ship enters the a fjord, it has to stop immediately. So in its turn, it's basically done. Okay, and if you start in a fjord, your movement cost is reduced by half. Okay, so um, let's see what else. Okay, let's start going up into the sea. All right, so ice. You have two different types of ice. Okay, so the only difference between these two hexes are this is this is drift ice on a regular sea hex. This is drift ice on a shallow hex. Okay, so it's a combination of a shallow, so all the things that come along with shallow plus drift ice. And here's pack ice. Now, difference between pack ice and drift ice. Number one, um, drift ice, unless you specify it in the settings, drift ice in effect. If you don't set drift ice in effect, then this is basically considered regular sea. Okay, it's ignored. Um, drift ice does. I think it causes when ships go through drift ice, they have to slow down. Subs are not affected by drift ice. Pack ice, sub uh, regular ships can't go in pack ice at all. Nuclear submarines can go in here fine, but diesel subs cannot go in these hexes. So diesel subs cannot go into into pack ice. Okay. Notice you can see. So here you have a drift ice plus a restricted plus a shallow. Okay. Here you have fjord plus drift ice. Okay. So Uh, let's see here. I think that's. I'm gonna look in the Seventh Fleet to see if there's any other terrain types that I might be missing. You notice how Seventh Fleet, it's pretty easy to see the difference, right? You have shallow. This is their restricted, right, with their, the lines, the dashed lines. I don't believe, I don't believe Seventh Fleet has any shoals. Yep, doesn't look like it has any shoals. Okay. So you only have to worry about drift ice. I'm sorry, you only have to worry about restricted. There is drift ice here, as well as shallow drift ice here. And it's the same rules apply, right? So wherever your mission you happen to be, here's some pack ice, which nothing can go in because I think this is actually not even part of the game. I think there is some pack ice up here. No, no, there's no pack ice in the Pacific. The only place there's pack ice is in the North Atlantic. In the Pacific, the worst it gets is drift ice. And again, unless you specify drift ice is in effect, and none of the missions that I've released so far have the drift ice in effect. So that means pretty much you're ignoring drift ice in all the scenarios that I've released so far. And here we have a bunch of restricted hexes. Okay. Bases. I think we all know what bases are. Um, these are close defense. These are close defense hexes. Let's see here. They're only in effect for certain missions. This one's a second fleet. I'm looking at the second fleet one, so it was built before I added in these close defense hexes. But if you were to play any of the seventh fleet ones, the seventh fleet ones um, have actual small icons here for the close defense. There's no reason to put the close defense and clutter up the map on this one because no ships are operating in the Pacific for these missions. Okay, but if they were, they'd be situated right here. Um, this bastion area, there's some very specific areas that are tracked by the physical game. One of the missions says that which I haven't made a mission for that yet, but in one of the actual missions for the actual paper game, there's a mission where U.S. subs want to get into the Soviet bastion area, and each one to get in here, you get some VPs for it because this is where all the boomers would be. I don't really consider it. There's another couple of areas, weird areas like Tsushima Straits. This is purely for VP. There's no actual real impact. There's no like, hey, it's harder to get into here or what have you. It's just an area that is designated off for certain missions to designate VPs. Um, all right, so I think that's it from the map. I'm trying to think of other things that I want to talk about. Let's see. There is some cost to get through certain of these hexes. Um, for most of them, it's just one. Weather will increase that. Um, Let me hit pause and I'll find the rules for that so we can go over that. Give me a second, real quick. Okay, we're just going to go into the code. So, um, so I'm just going to look at the code how I wrote it to show all the different things. You don't have to necessarily be able to read code, but this will tell us how we do it. So essentially, in this function that is like checking to see surface how what the cost is for surface ships to move. We noticed that number one, if uh, if if it doesn't have if it's not a PC or a Corvette, it can't move into shoals at all. If it's pack ice, surface ships can't move there at all. The base distance for depending on the weather, it's 4 points for storm, 2 points for squall, and 1 point for clear. If the ship is moving at full speed, which for ships means high speed, and it's a restricted location, then the distance gets increased, the cost gets increased by one. So that means you could have it as much as 5 points. Storm in a restricted would cost you 5 points. Okay. If there's drift ice and the drift ice is in effect, then let's see, then the distance goes up again. Okay, so I'm not really sure. I think there is some that is drift ice and restricted. So if you had the full Monty of a drift ice and restricted, and it's in a storm, then it could cost up to 6 points for a ship to move, which means it wouldn't be able to move there unless it was the very first move of the turn. So that's a key point. Ships can move at least one hex no matter what the cost is, right? So even if it costs 12 points, which I don't think that's even possible, but if it costs 12 points to get into that hex, the only way you can get into it is if you start the turn, and it's the only movement that the ship makes that turn. So if let's see here. And I think for fjords, I believe that yeah, it's not shown here, but basically, like I mentioned before, it doesn't cost you any extra points to enter fjords, but it just means you have to actually stop moving. So if you enter fjord, it doesn't cost anymore, but you have to stop moving. For subs, it's a little simpler. Subs can't go into shoals at all. If the sub is in deep mode, or is in full speed. Those are two different options. Deep mode means it's the sub is harder to find, and but it only has a movement allowance of one. It can't go into restricted, shallow, or pack ice. So if a sub is running at full speed, or the sub is in deep mode, it can't even go into a restricted, shallow, or pack ice. If it's running at full speed, it also can't go into drift ice. If there's pack ice and the unit is a diesel sub, it can't go into it at all. And so the base distance for subs is always one. It could get affected. It won't ever actually get affected by weather or by anything. Okay, so for subs, it's either I can go there or I can't. I believe for fjord as well. If subs go into a fjord, they have to stop. Okay, so that's pretty much I'm going to zoom out a little bit. It's going to take a little bit. I am working on one of the slower things about the game is the rendering of all of the objects. And I've noticed in some of the huge scenarios, it does take a while to do things. So I am trying to, when I have a chance to breathe, I'm going to redesign how it re-renders everything and make it so that the only things it does is the things it has to do versus wasteful re-rendering of things if the thing already exists. Um, so let's see here. All right, so again, here's here you have a entry point from two different off max hexes. Notice it says Midway 37. It may be hard for you to read this, but I can read it. Midway 37 or Hawaii 57. That means from where are they at? Oh, I think they're up here. Yeah. So aircraft that are based at either Midway or at Pearl Harbor, if you want to bring them into this area, they have to utilize a ton of distance. In fact, I'm not sure. There's only a few aircraft that can actually make it from here and safely make it back to base, like the B-52s and the T9, some of the T-95s that have over 150. There's other ways of them getting. So for both those bases, I've given them a couple different ways of getting to there. So anyway, let's see. Let's go to I'd like to talk about, if I could, these things right here, which are en routes. Okay, so um, okay, perfect example would be, let's go to Second Fleet. All right, so I've described this in the rules of the game and some of the pop-ups, but essentially, right, these areas here, they're like not actually on in the game. They're additional ones that I've added in, and they represent logistical areas. Okay, so for instance, I put one right there over Norfolk, where the U.S. Atlantic fleets are based. So when you're building scenarios, or if you want to build a scenario that spans the globe, you could set up ships here, and then in the very beginning of the turn, you'll enter the strategic naval phase, and you can then choose where they go. And if you choose them to go to this zone, then they'll pop up here, but they'll pop up with the little yellow marker showing that they're en route. So for instance, if we look in this screen, we notice that in this hex, you have a bunch of things that are en route in 4 turns, which is going to be just a little over a day, right? There's 3 turns a day. You got the Coral Sea, that's 2 days away, 6 turns. You got a Lipscomb class sub, 8 turns. A bunch of frigates and some more convoys at 11. Some more stuff at 13. And then finally, the Independence battle group shows up at 16 turns, which is 5 days away. Okay. Um, let's see. So through strategic naval movement, you can move uh, from any location that's a logistical area to any others as long as it's connected, which generally I think from a sea perspective, every zone is connected to everything else, right? So just as long as you want to spend you want to spend the time to travel there, okay? And these en routes that I mentioned here, it shows here en route, it's turns. So for ships, it's always in turns. For aircraft, it's always in well, sometimes it's turns. Like if a plane lands at a separate if a plane lands at an air base that is not its home base, then um, it's considered en route for 3 turns, which means it's going to take a full day for that plane to transfer all its logistics over to that other base and then be able to be used again. During the action phase, though, you have a concept of if, for instance, if I had some planes starting at Loring Air Force Base and I sent them on a mission to here, then they would show up at this hex with the 13 en route 13 impulses. Okay, and that's not turns, that's just impulses. So it'll use up 13 of its movements. So after 13 impulses, it would show up here. Okay, so you just have to understand from the context what that en route means. Um, the general for ships is really easy. Here we have some others coming in. Here's a group of ships. Um, they're en route 10 turns, so a little bit over 3 days. They'll show up here. Now, when they show up here, there'll be a phase that'll tell you that you need to move them onto the map, and the hexes. So certain hexes are linked to it. You don't need to know them right now, but when they do get here in 10 turns, a phase will come up saying, prompting you to say, hey, you now need to place these guys on the map. And a bunch of hexes will get highlighted. I think it'll be these. And then you can just move your ships onto any one of these locations. Conversely, if if the ships are already in this area, then they'll have the option to enter the strategic network. And they can enter this network and head to any of these other places, right? They can go travel to Bermuda, they can travel um, to this. They can move from this zone to this zone, and when they do, they'll show up here and they'll show they're en route. So these hexes are not really destinations. They're just things that help designate anything that's coming into this area. And so you may have some that have different en route amounts on it. All right, let's see. So this is an en route zone. So this would be where if uh, ships have to go around Africa and come back up, this is where they would show up as they're approaching. Okay. Um, during the Sixth Fleet mass mission, the Capstone mission, you have a bunch of Soviet subs that are coming in here. So they'll be getting into here like at certain times down the pike. All right, I think that's about it from a maps perspective. I am going to transition a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and end this video. It'll be the school video. And then I do plan on recording another video that talks about the new massive Second Fleet Third World War scenario with the AI. But I'll do that in a different video that's not going to be part of the school playlist. So, I really hope these videos have been helpful for you. They have been fun to make. I'm hoping that between the uh, the markers video, the ship video, the aircraft video, and this video, I think this should give you a pretty good idea of how the game is laid out, and it gives you a good starting point at least to start understanding things. If you want to ask me questions, you obviously can. You could either ask questions on my YouTube channel, you can send me messages in Facebook, or you can also join the Discord server, which the link to the Discord server is here on YouTube, and it is if you go to my channel header, you'll see a couple of links, one for the download of the game and the other one for the Discord link. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody's time, and until next time, I'll see you in the next video.